Hey folks!
You are good.
How you doing? Thank you very much for tuning in for another exciting episode of me reading from my book, Kamikaze Kangaroos.
Dun dun
Dun
dun.
dun dun is right. So yeah, I've had a splendid weekend, in case anyone was wondering. I've been to a pub for the first time since the pandemic started. So consequently, I didn't get a lot else done. I think it was early March, wasn't it?
I think it was actually.
Yeah, so shut the pubs down early March, and we actually went on one of the last days that you could. And I was working on the sci-fi book that I just released recently, and I sat there and had a nice couple of pints of cider, and Rue sat there and had a couple of pints of cider and worked on some drawing projects she was doing, and we came home none the wiser. But then I think a few days after that they shut down all the pubs and then the restaurants and everything like that, and it's been locked down until quite recently. So yes, first chance back at the pub, had a really nice dinner.
Yeah, it was nice.
And,
you had massive fish and chips.
Yes, so I really enjoyed that. Now I got some good news for you people, which is I'm giving you all a week off. So it's coming up to my birthday, and in a couple of days, which is also me and Rue's wedding anniversary.
Yeah.
9 years. 9 years. We've been married now, and we're still both alive, so there's something working there. So so we're going away for the weekend, and we can't go far because of lockdown. So we've got a place down south with a little hot tub. So we're gonna nip down there and just relax for a little bit. Probably still get a little bit of writing done because can't help it.
You've got plans for this year.
Anyway, so next week, that's a long waffly way. Surprise, it's me of telling you that we're not doing one of these readings next Sunday. So today will be my last one from Kamikaze Kangaroos.
Ooh.
And next weekend I'll graduate onto Can I Kiss Her Yet, which is the book about the weddings and all sorts of other stuff. About camels, yes, about the honeymoons that we had in different places, and the trip to Jordan that we did, and the grand adventure that we did around England in my granddad's little crappy little Nissan Micra, and all sorts of other stuff. Anyway, there's a load of stuff in that book. I probably will just do 2 or 3 readings from that one. It's a slightly smaller book anyway, and it's never been quite as popular as Kamikaze Kangaroos. And then, so I'll do maybe 2, maybe 3, we'll see. Then jump on to Shave My Spider. Woo! So anyway, right, that's enough waffle. So we're going to get started. As I said last week, to this week we are doing some bits and pieces about New Zealand. So yeah, at this point, after travelling around for the best part of 2 years with Rusty, me and Rue basically had booted Jill, bless her heart, out in Sydney. We went on then to Melbourne, where I worked for a company called Installex, building exhibitions, which was pretty ridiculous, but anyway, I won't get into that. And Rue actually worked counting people on trains. She actually got a job where she had to get on trains, count the number of people on the trains, and get off again, and get on another one. And we couldn't quite fathom it, but anyway, that's the kind of weird crap that we do when we travel around the place. But we'd actually been separated from Jill for a few months, about 4 or 5 months at this point. Yeah, a little while anyway. And I'd been chatting to her, and she was not very happy doing what she was doing. She stayed in Sydney, and she'd struggled to get a job. And eventually, she had got a job doing very similar to me. She was erecting marquees and things like that. She's rough old work for Jill, but she's strong as hell. So, and but she wasn't really loving it. And then a friend of hers from England was out kind of holidaying, and they took a road trip themselves all around the is it called the Great Coast Road?
Yeah,
Great Ocean Road, I think it is. Did a really nice trip anyway to Adelaide, which we've still never been to. Came to see us in Melbourne briefly, and we chatted about the possibility of just buggering off to New Zealand, because our visas were about to end in Australia, and what do you do after that? Jill was still single, and once her friend went back home, she was on her own. So it seemed like a good plan. So her visa expired a little bit before mine, so she went to New Zealand ahead of us. But I'll get into it now. So that's all just to sort of set the scene. And so here we go. So this is about our application for jobs in the ski resorts. Anyway, around this time, it occurred to me that if we were planning on working in New Zealand's ski industry, we should probably apply for some jobs there. So I applied for all of them, 3 times. Once for Jill, once for Roo, and once for myself. It was neater that way. The first place to get back to me was a company called Ruapihu Alpine Lifts, who ran the only 2 ski fields in New Zealand's North Island. They were back to back on either side of a mountain called Mount Ruapihu. Of the 2, I'd selected jobs on the Taroa side, purely because the other side was called Whakapapa, a Maori word usually used to refer to their tribal hierarchy and genealogical structure. And in Maori, Hua is pronounced F, making the name of the place Whakapapa. I didn't think I'd be able to keep a straight face if I ended up working there. The employment people at Taroa agreed to give us a Skype call by way of an interview. Me for the role of ski lift operator / attendant, because that seemed to me like the whole point of being there, and Roo as road crew, because the job description said it mainly involved parking cars, and she said, I can do that. And for Jill, I'd gone for ticket collector / customer services, because if anyone could talk to customers, talk them into the ground in fact, it was Jill. They called me a fortnight later. The interview went something like this. So, Mr. Slater, you've applied to be a lifty with us. I have. Yes, a ski lift operator. Oh yes, that's right, that's me. So let's talk a bit about your experience. I haven't got any. Oh, okay then, let's talk a bit about your background in snow sports. I haven't got any of that either. All right then, that's okay. So what's your reason for seeking employment in the snow sport industry? Is being cool an acceptable answer? Ha! A joker. Great, we like the jokers. I thought that sounded fairly positive. For the rest of the interview, I was grilled on my mechanical knowledge, none. Driving ability, none. Other sporting background, none. And education, none. Okay, so I have a degree in acting, but I'm pretty sure that counts as none. I was asked if I had any previous work references, and I agonised over this for a good few minutes. My current job still didn't know I was leaving, because if I didn't get this job, there's a good chance I wasn't. Beyond that, my most recent job had been for Trevor at Global Gardens, before the Bibbleman track. Given that I'd had to threaten Trevor with reporting him to the government just to get paid, it didn't seem like the ideal source of a work-related reference. I seriously doubted... Oh yes, previous to that, I'd single-handedly depopulated a sandalwood plantation 1 tree at a time. Then there was a stint at the Underground Backpackers, where I failed miserably to make a bar fail miserably, and a handful of days cleaning toilets for the city of Canning. It didn't look good. In the end, I asked Lindsay of the paving job at Buildcraft, figuring that even though I'd left abruptly, I'd been good at what I did for him. Brick paving was about as irrelevant to winter sports industry as it was possible to get, short of, say, volunteering with exotic animals in Ecuador, but my options were fairly limited. Roo's interview was conducted a couple of hours later. She'd sat listening to my call, so she was prepared for the first few questions. So, Miss Raynon, you've applied to be a roadie here at Mount Ruapihu. Yes, but I'm afraid I've no real experience in the winter sports environment because I'm from Australia. I'm very enthusiastic though. Well, that's good to hear. So, what makes you want to come and work for us? I've never seen snow before. In the silence that followed, I could almost hear the interviewer's head hitting his desk. When I called Jill in Sydney to ask how her interview had gone, she was, as always, relentlessly positive about it. They only asked me a couple of questions, she explained. Oh, really? We had a proper grilling. No, Jill said, I had a nice lady. She asked if I'd been skiing before, so I told her I'd done some ice skating lessons, and she asked if I had any customer service experience, so I said a bit. Then she asked how I was at talking to people, and that was it. Really? Our interviews are half an hour long. So was mine. But what else did she ask you? Nothing. We were just chatting. She always wanted a horse. What? Bloody hell, Jill, you were supposed to be telling her why you'd be good at the job. Yeah, well, we kind of ran out of time for that. But she was very friendly. I told her all about Camp America and driving around in Rusty. She loved the idea of doing a road trip around Oz. Oh my God. Jill got the job straight away. And a week later, amongst many feelings of anxiousness and indecision, both Roo and I were offered the positions we'd applied for. I can only think it must have been a slow year for applications. We were seriously bottom of the barrel stuff. But no matter, Roo was going to get her wish. She was going to the land of hobbits to see snow for the first time in her life. And I had to go and tell Installex that I was leaving. there was one last millstone round our necks. Rusty. Like an old friend of the family, hell, he was one of the family. We'd be incredibly sad to be parted from him. But there was no two ways about it. Our relationship, with all its ups and downs, trials and tribulations, and almost enough heartache to write a book about, was over. Rusty had to go. But how? Here's the thing, said Rue. We can't just leave him. He's still registered to me, and there's a massive fine for abandoning a vehicle. So we've either got to wreck him or sell him. We both cast a lingering glance through the living room window at the dishevelled van parked outside. Neither of us spoke for a few seconds. It was almost like an agreed moment of silence for the old car, a mark of respect. I love that van. Me too, said Rue. I hadn't even realised I'd spoken aloud. We could at least take him to the garage round the corner. We should be able to make it that far, and we can wait for him there and wait for him to cool down and drive on to the wreckers, I guess, if there's no joy. Yeah, I think that's it. We'll ask if there's anything at all they can do, absolutely anything, just to make him saleable. He's carried us so far, I can't bear to scrap him. So we climbed back inside for what could potentially be our last ever ride. Following the mechanic's instructions, we parked Rusty outside the garage. I'll see what I can do, he said, and for once there was no trace of condescension. We left feeling upbeat in spite of the potentially crippling repair bill looming over us. We had less than a week to get Rusty fixed, advertised and sold, or we'd be sending him to the great car graveyard in the sky. Well, via the great car graveyard on Lloyd Street. It was a nervous wait. When the call came, the mechanic's assistant couldn't even give us a quote. He simply said we'd better come in for a chat. It didn't bode well, unsurprisingly. The mechanic himself was in a jolly good mood, though. Expecting to attend an execution, we started clutching at straws of hope as he described the battery of tests he'd put Rusty through. And I couldn't figure out what the hell was going on, he concluded. No reason at all why he should be boiling up like that. It was more or less what we'd expected. But then, the mechanic held up a finger to magnify the suspense. I thought to look at this. He reached into Rusty's engine bay and twisted off the radiator cap. See that? He held it up for our inspection. The rubber's all perished. I'd guess this is the original radiator cap, so it must be, 20-odd years old? Sounds quite likely. Well then, there's your problem. No seal on the cap, so your radiator water is being pushed out by the pressure. So by the time you've done a couple of miles, the steam will have been spraying out, but it's invisible and the engine's underneath you anyway, so there's no water left and you boil up. What? I don't understand it. Are you trying to tell me this radiator cap is the problem? I'd say so. And if we replace it, the van should be fine. Tip-top, nothing else wrong with him, other than being a bit rusty. Where can we get one of these things? How much are they? My heart was racing now. I was half expecting to wake up at any moment. Should sell them right there, he pointed behind us. Opposite his garage was a branch of Super Cheap Auto. Should cost about $10. No freaking way. What do we owe you? Rusty asked him. Oh, that's all right. Just feels good, to have found the problem. Bit of a puzzle, I can tell you. Really? You sure? Yeah, no worries. Just bring him back here if you have any more problems. So we hustled into the shop. I don't think anyone has ever been breathless with excitement over buying a radiator cap before. The staff treated us warily, as though we might have just escaped from a mental asylum. Yes! I shrieked when the register clocked up $12.75. Bloody car bills, Rue quipped. They're always more than the original quote. We fitted the cap to Rusty and went for an exploratory drive. And we drove, and we drove. And Rusty, bless his little petrol-powered heart, was as good as new. That night, Rue advertised him on the Gumtree for $1,500. We had 5 calls in the first 3 minutes. On the brand new Skype phone, which Rue also advertised for $80. It was still new, but the Skype function wouldn't work in New Zealand. The cash from selling it would go towards buying a lesser phone for each of us so we could stay in touch if we were working on different shifts in the ski fields. Everyone who called out about Rusty agreed to buy him before we put the phone down. I actually had to choose who to call back, as we wanted to be sure he would go to a good home. We settled on a young surfer dude called Sam, who said he'd let us know when his mechanic friend was available to come and check him out. We waited for them to call with bated breath. We didn't move without the phone. We took it to the shop with us when we went to buy dinner. We took it to the kitchen with us while we cooked dinner. For 2 nights, we slept with it between our pillows, though Rue had maybe promised that when the time came, I would answer it. So I was sitting in the lounge, watching TV after my last shift with Installex, when I heard a loud, "Shit!" from the direction of the bathroom. Rue came running in, shaking something in her hand. "Shit! It's the phone!" What? Is it ringing? No! Oh my God, Tony, I dropped it down the toilet. What? How is that even possible? I don't know. It was in my back pocket, and when I pulled my pants down, she held the phone out to me. It had a certain moistness to it. Ew, it's still dripping. Did you pee on it? I had no choice. Oh crap. So that's knackered then. But we need that phone. Shit, it's been bought for $80. Well, I doubt they'll want it now. Unless, some people pay extra for that sort of thing. No! What about the guys who want to buy Rusty? How are they going to call us now? I don't know. I can't believe it. All we had to do was look after that phone and I dropped it down the frigging toilet. And peed on it. And peed on it! Okay, let's think about this. Give me the phone. How did you get it out of the toilet? She glared at me. Okay, well, go and wash your hands then. I took the phone very gingerly and carried it into the kitchen where I laid it on to rest on a tea towel. The display was blank and there was a bit of liquid behind it. No response to my pushing the power button. I cracked open the back of the phone and unleashed a mini tsunami along with the battery. Rue came up behind me to look over the shoulder. It's dead then? Well, it's definitely off the market. Rue felt terrible, so I tried not to take the piss out of her too much. After all, the phone had already done that. It possessed remarkably sponge-like qualities for a phone. She blurted out solutions as fast as I could shoot them down. Can't you borrow Kat's phone? And do what? Call them? Nope. Why not? Because the phone number is in that phone. Shit! We passed a nervous evening until Rue heard something jingling from my work bag. Oh my God, your old phone. I must have put both numbers on the advert. In a mad scrabble, we got to it and answered it before it rung off. It was Sam, exactly the bloke we'd been waiting for, and he still wanted Rusty. I can't interest you in a phone that my girlfriend pissed all over, can I asked. No! Rue hissed. But I'd already hung up. It was just a bit of toilet humour. I'd arranged to meet Sam and his mate the following afternoon, which happened to be our last full day in Australia. This was cutting it a bit finer than I'd intended. If they decided they didn't want the van, well, we were screwed. I had one more job to do that evening. I had to contact our buyer and explain that our Skype phone had been withdrawn from sale due to water damage. To say we were nervous about meeting Rusty's future owners is an understatement akin to saying the Bible caused some controversy. They both seemed very keen though and stood in awe of the van's fading paint job. It's awesome, Sam exclaimed. They jumped straight in for a test drive and looped the block several times, while Rue and I took turns in apologising for each of Rusty's idiosyncrasies. Character traits, we called them. And after a test drive, the mechanic friend, who I'd been picturing as a human-sized clockwork robot, crawled underneath to look at, well, whatever the hell it is knowledgeable people look at under there. Could be a doorway to Narnia for all I know. He seemed satisfied. One last run, he requested. All right, Sam said, and then we'll go and talk cash. So they got back in, and Rue and I watched as they did donuts around the junction, screeching the tyres and burning some rubber. It was much harsher treatment than we'd ever subjected Rusty to, and I cringed, half expecting him to topple over. But no, he passed that test with flying colours too. They pulled up and turned off. On a whim, the mechanic turned the key again, performing one last test start just to be sure. There was a click, and then silence. And for all I know, Rusty may never have moved again. We apologised profusely over pizza at a nearby restaurant. It had to be the immobiliser. We'd never had a problem with it before, but the symptoms matched. The timing was unbelievable. All I could think was the rough driving had shaken a wire loose somewhere. And now, we stared into our pizza boxes and waited for the verdict. I was going to offer you $1,300, Sam said, because he needs a bit of work and the roof rails are rusted through, so I'll have to replace him to carry my surfboard rack. I agreed. Sam was silent and thoughtful for a long while. Then he spoke again. Rue and I braced ourselves for the worst. And you know what? I'm still going to offer you $1,300. What? Really? Yeah, I've got a mate who can come and reset the immobiliser. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. That's incredible. Thank you so much. No worries. It is an awesome van. You are so right. The money changed hands, cash on the spot, and we filled out the paperwork over the last slice of pizza. Rue and I shook hands with the two guys and we went our separate ways, on foot. I can't believe it, Sam said as he left. I just bought a car and I'm going home on the train. Rue and I walked home slowly, alternately laughing at what had just happened and shedding tears about never seeing Rusty again. It probably sounds daft to be crying over a car, but for all his idiosyncrasies, Rusty had always been there for us. Together, we'd racked up well over 30,000 kilometres. My relationship with Rue had started out on those cramped and awkward back seats. Hell, we'd racked up a few miles of our own in there, but we decided not to mention that during our sales pitch. I'd like to think that Rusty's still out there somewhere, shuttling a bunch of gnarly surfing dudes to the beach at 5 in the morning to shred some waves. It will be a fitting retirement for the van of his experience. If he is out there, to his current owners, I salute you. And to Rusty, thanks for everything. You were a star.
He was. Can't believe it was a radiator car.
So I'm going to skip forward to our first day of work, Ruapihu Alpine Lifts in New Zealand. Our first day of work was the source of much trepidation. As far as we knew, most of the staff did this all the time. Some even followed winter around the world, moving from here to Japan, from there to Canada, or to the US, and from there to Europe. It was a way of life, working hard, partying harder, and hitting the slopes hardest of all. There was a lot to recommend it, but the job, predictably, was not one of them. We showed up for the staff induction, all 3 of us together again. It was just like old times, me, Jill and Rue. As we were all outdoor staff, we stayed together for the presentation about Mount Ruapihu's history. It was used as Mount Doom in the Lord of the Rings film. Say it, Rue.
Mount Doom! Doom!
And the pointless slideshow they always show you at the start of these jobs, where they tell you about every different job there is. Fun. Presumably, it was to rub our faces in the fact that we'd picked the worst ones. Then we sat through the questions and answers, and that's where I got the first inkling of just how far in a field we had stepped onto, because everyone around us was asking questions, and I didn't understand any one of them. What are the rules on hot laps? What's the backcountry policy? How deep is the base? How much snow do you make? How often do you bomb? Arg. I was clearly in over my head. Again. This time in snow, which gave the appearance of being softer, but which, as any hardened snow sports addict will tell you, was considerably more dangerous than it looked. Here then, for the uninitiated, are the answers to those questions. Hot laps were banned for the first few weeks. It turns out this is a clever trick used by many lifties, whereby they take turns to actually run the lift they're working on, each person doing 2 people's jobs while their partner takes the lift to the top and skis or snowboards right back down again. Then they take over running the lift while the first guy goes up. It's a great way to get a sneaky bit of extra riding in, while generally being overlooked by the bosses, so long as each person manning the lift is capable of running it on their own. I was not. Back country was everything outside the boundaries of the ski area. It was not to be trifled with for fear of avalanches. The base, snow depth, was 2 metres, but by the time we'd been there a while it rose to 4, requiring much digging out of cars and buildings in the process. Snow was made, apparently, every single night, to supplement the snow that fell naturally. There were gigantic cannons stationed all over the mountain for this purpose, each capable of shooting tons of misted water skywards. The resulting snow was granular rather than powdery, but meant the mountain could be open for skiing whether it snowed overnight or not. And the bombs? Those were exactly what they sounded like. Explosives detonated by expert ski patrollers to set off potential avalanches in a controlled manner. Whew! There was a lot to learn. Not about the job, though. Our lift supervisor, who told us to call him Boob, took us up and down around every ski lift in the ski field. We followed him like a string of ducklings, waddling through the knee-deep snow, until by some minor miracle we found ourselves back at base, a wet, sparsely furnished staff building they called Tor 1. So, now you know about the lifts, he informed us, but you can't wait to get started, eh? See you all tomorrow. Don't drink too much tonight. And that was it. Just like that, our training was over. I'd never pushed a button. I had only the flimsiest concept of how a ski lift even worked, much less how to fix one if something went wrong. I didn't know radio etiquette. I didn't know my job description. I didn't know for sure how many things I didn't know, but one thing was sure, there was plenty of them. So, what do we actually do? I asked the bloke who was sitting next to me on the staff bus taking us back down the mountain. Search me, he said. I'm new here. I'm Keith. We shook hands. I'm Tony. Nice to meet you. This is shaping up to be an interesting week. The first part of the job was something I could understand, if not quite believe. The next morning we assembled in our staff room, did a quick roll call and armed ourselves for combat and headed straight out again. Our opponents were the lift chairs, which overnight had turned into fantastic frozen sculptures. The relentless weather, coupled with dramatically sub-zero temperatures, transformed the humble steel and wooden frames into a series of ice-massive monoliths, layered and carved by snow and the wind into intricate abstract shapes. They were breathtakingly beautiful. They were also a pain in the arse. Every chair was filled with ice, taking up the space where 3 or 4 paying customers would need to sit. Foot-long icicles hung in thick rows from every surface, sometimes melding together into trunks the size of a human leg. The steel cables groaned under the weight of it all, thousands of kilos of ice outweighing even the hundreds of customers who thronged the lift on a daily basis. Our mission was to remove all this ice from the chairs by beating the shit out of them with baseball bats. The bats were known as Yeti sticks, presumably because in the instance of mass invasion by abominable snowmen, they would be our weapon of choice. What good they'd be against an 8-foot-tall science-defying monster was beyond me, but they worked a treat for their primary purpose, which was the willful destruction of company property. It was great fun, although knackering. Exertion at altitude is more difficult, and one-on-one combat with a suspended steel chair is about as hardcore exercise as you can possibly get. At first, I would pound away at a chair, making little visible difference no matter how hard I smacked the damn thing. I was aiming at the ice, you see, assuming it to be brittle, but ice was not the right target. After a few days, I learned to find the sweet spots on the chair's superstructure, where a precise hit could set off a chain reaction that would destroy the Death Star. Okay. What it really did was it vibrated the frame violently enough to shake large quantities of ice loose in one gigantic avalanche. It was incredibly satisfying to see an iceberg approach, to time it just right, aim and swing, and see 100 kilos of ice crash to the ground, revealing the shivering form of the chair within. Then a few good whacks from the next lifty in line would clear the debris, and by the time the chair had completed its run around the base pile and was heading back up, it was largely frost-free. In theory. There were variations to this scenario, all of which I demonstrated admirably in my first 2 weeks on the job. There was the miss-hit. Fractionally off, usually due to bad footing, it produced an embarrassingly loud clang from the chair, but achieved nothing more dramatic than the redistribution of a few snowflakes. Then there was the flat hit, where either the angle or the grip tension was too great. This sent a shockwave of equal and opposite force back up the arm, typically causing me to drop the bat, fall backwards in the snow, and shout, "Ah, motherfucker!" And then there was the 1 in a million shot, where powerful contact with unyielding force sheared the tip of the bat straight off and sent it spinning into Keith's face. Yeti sticks broke all the time doing this job, and there was a fairly high turnover of them. But only once did someone require stitches as a direct result of it. By the second week, a few minor mishaps aside, I felt I was getting the hang of it. I turned it into a game, competing against the others on a chair-by-chair basis. Or I would have done if anyone else cared enough to play along. Most of them just stood there, looking bored, giving each chair a lazy clout as it went past. Ha! Not me! I was dedicated to this job, man. So I competed against myself, narrating my private game internally, and sometimes externally when the excitement took me. Chair 179 approaches, looking heavy. He sights for the sweet spot. He swings. Only it was the dreaded miss-hit. No! I swung again, too hasty because the chair was now too close, well within the arc required for optimal power. My bat smacked into the ice with a wet thud, making nothing more than a dent. Rookie mistake. The mistimed shot had also robbed me of the chance to take another big swing. If I waited until the chair was past, I'd have the perfect angle on it again, only from behind. But now it was gone. Pulled out of reach on its chain, full of ice, ready to taunt me all the way back up the mountain. No. There was only one thing for it. Show that chair who's boss. As the other lifties turned their attention to the next chair in line, I brandished my Yeti stick like a samurai sword, screamed, "Banzai!" at the top of my lungs and charged off through the piles of crushed ice after the one that got away. I scored another whack on it as it swung around the supporting pylon and was gaining on the chair as it began its long trip uphill. The accepted wisdom was that the chair would come around again, and until then there were plenty more of them to focus on. But I took it personally that an inanimate object could escape my wrath so easily. Learning from my earlier mistake, I concentrated on catching up to the chair rather than swiping ineffectually at it from a distance. A couple more strides and I was on it. I brought my Yeti stick down as I came alongside and was rewarded with a shower of collapsing icicles. Only a few remained, solid around the top of the frame. 2 more steps. One final leap coupled with a mighty downswing smashed free the last chunks of ice, and they rained down on me as the chair was swept up and away. I landed in a crouch, not unlike a triumphant ninja. Yes! I got it! I bellowed, announcing my victory to everyone within earshot. But there was a danger in this tactic. As with all potentially game-winning strategies, there were risks. And in this case, the risk was the next chair in line, which had swung around the pylon and followed me inexorably up the hill. As I turned to bask in the admiration of my peers, there was a cry of, "Look out!" and the next chair ploughed into me at penis height, folding me double around its frigid seal bars and carrying me with it on its prescribed path. "Shit! It's got Tony!" I heard from the control booth. "No worries," I yelled back as the lift swept me higher. My feet swung free in the fresh, chilly air as the ground fell away beneath me. "Jump!" someone shouted, followed immediately by someone else shouting, "Don't jump!" But my hands wouldn't hold on forever. As amusing as the thought was of being carried the whole way to the top of the lift, it was a 15-minute journey, and my fingers were very, very cold. I braced myself for a heroic plunge, but there was a sudden clunk, and I felt the lift slowing to a halt. One of the others had slapped the emergency stop button. I dropped a couple of body lengths into the snow below me, which was plenty deep enough to absorb my impact. I was still floundering around when Boob reached me, thrust an arm down and hauled me out of the Tony-shaped hole I'd created. "You didn't have to stop it," I greeted him. "It wasn't an emergency." "It bloody well was. In another 30 seconds you'd have been 20 metres up, dangling by your bloody hands." He shook his head in disbelief. "And that's the 3rd time this week. You've got to stop doing this." And now I shall regale you with our account of The Great Storm.
Dun, dun, dun. What's that?
Scrooge's dramatic emphasis.
Yes, no drums for me.
The Great Storm. There has been much debate about the Great Storm, specifically about which storm this title pertains to. For me, there will only ever be one Great Storm, not to be confused with the rather disappointing Great Perth Storm in 2011, which I also lived through, and which, despite a series of panic-inducing warnings from the government, caused nothing more damaging than the widespread rearrangement of plastic patio furniture. The thing is, when you work a ski season, the weather forecast goes from being that completely irrelevant bit at the end of the news that only your mum wants to watch, to being a vital piece of information. It's not uncommon to find groups of people huddled together like kids in the playground, debating the 3-day outlook, as though it was the finals of the UEFA Cup. Put simply, weather matters. Because we had to get up so early, it was rare for anyone other than the company to have up-to-date information. As we stamped and shivered, waiting for the staff bus in the tin-roofed shack that serves us as depot, we were treated to an endless stream of people walking up to read the forecast pinned to the notice board, and either punching the air jubilantly or muttering curse words under their breath. You see, there were 3 distinct categories of people waiting for that bus, and they all wanted very different things. If the weather was perfect, then anyone working inside would be mightily pissed off, because not only would they be forced to watch everyone else having a great time outside, they would also be rushed off their feet by the influx of customers. Those working outside got to appreciate it more, because we were in it, and might even get a chance to sneak off for a sneaky couple of hot laps and really appreciate it. Of course, they would also feel the full effects of a mountain full of punters, but it meant they, which means me, could mock the indoors types for their cosy and ultimately less rewarding existence. The third group was generally the happiest because they were the people who were on their day off, and they were catching the bus up the mountain purely for recreational purposes. No one liked them. Now, if the weather was bad, or even really, really, really bad, it was a complete reversal of fortunes. The lucky buggers working inside would be safe and warm and bored enough to risk nipping out for a ride in the long gaps between customers. I, on the other hand, would be stuck outside, piss wet through and freezing my arse off, and inwardly pleading with the 5 die-hard teenagers still circling my lift to give it up and go home before I was forced to hurt them. The poor bastards who had a day off had the shittiest end of the stick and would generally be stuck up the mountain until they could bum a lift back down again. They'd suffered, had nothing to show for it, and worst of all, they missed the chance to have a lie-in. But no one had any sympathy for them. Weather forecasting, however, is not an exact science. Even with all the technology at our disposal these days, Mother Nature is a tricky old bird and has a nasty habit of switching her plays at the last minute. So when I was heading up the mountain on a blustery, grey day with more severe weather expected in the evening, I was cautiously optimistic. It wasn't actually raining, but the threat of it would keep the lift queues light. I was pretty well windproofed in my outfit, up to 5 layers deep in places, so I hoped I could stay dry and take advantage of the slow day to get some practice in. It was not to be. By mid-morning, conditions were going downhill rapidly. Rumour had it the storm was moving up quicker than expected and might even hit before the close of business. From where I stood, halfway up the mountain on a slope called the Winter Garden, It was surprising that we hadn't closed already. Wind was raging, buffeting chairs and customers alike, and a slushy drizzle was slowly working its way through all my layers. When a lifty called Con rode up on his knackered board to cover my brake, I asked him if he thought we should bother. It must have been truly miserable up the top by then, but Con, an old hand, knew the score. Nah, no way they'll close her now. Gotta wait until after lunch. That way they don't have to give out refunds. Of course, the crafty buggers. If the mountain closed early, half the ticket price would have been refunded to anyone that asked. By staying open a little later, even though the conditions were horrible, they were still offering the chance to ski, even if no one in their right mind would want to. Therefore, no refunds had to be issued. It seemed a bit harsh at the time, and it was a reminder that, although we were there to have fun and muck about, for the bosses of the company, this was all about profit. And decisions made purely for profit, in my experience, are rarely good ones. It took seconds to ride down to the base for my break, but it was a real battle to get back up afterwards. I managed, soaked and frozen stiff, and toughed out another pointless hour before I got the call to close down the winter garden. I hadn't had a customer on it in half that time, and the call was long overdue, but no matter. Everything above me was already shut. All I wanted to do was pull in my queue gates and get the hell off that mountain. By the time I was ready to go, another call had come in. The whole ski field was closed, and customers were being directed by the ski patrollers to get down as quickly as they could, which is exactly what I did. I didn't know this time, but conditions at base were already quite bad. Rue, working with her fellow roadies, had been tasked with escorting customers to their cars. It wasn't safe to send them out alone, as the wind was threatening to blow people clear across the car park and over the edge of the cliff. Rue struggled a bit, being as how she weighed less than most of our customers, but she bravely battled on, hauling car doors open with all her strength and using her body to stop them filling up with snow. She half carried a woman with a broken leg, freshly wrapped by the medics, and even loaned the woman her ski gloves. One of the last people on the mountain, I skidded down to base in a full blizzard. I could see absolutely nothing, but I'd learnt the terrain well enough by then to get most of the way down just on feel. Base, when I got there, was in barely organised chaos. Rue had just been sent out on another trip. 2 ski patrollers were with her, hauling 4 members and 3 generations of the same family between them. It was now considered too dangerous, even for staff members, to go out alone. Rue was inching her way across the car park, arms linked with a 10-year-old boy, when the full force of the storm hit. I was the last to board the staff bus, which thankfully had waited for me. I felt terrible about leaving Rue in the middle of all this, but so far it was still just a particularly shitty burst of bad weather. She'd be on the next bus, along with all the managers and the rest of the road crew, and I'd make our nice room tidy and warm for her when she got home. Or so I thought. The bus crawled out of the car park and started down the road, but it was a total whiteout. The huge windscreen filled with snow much faster than the wipers could clear it, so Keith stepped into the breach. He jumped off the bus and walked in front of it, one gloved hand flat on the windscreen, directing the driver and one frozen footstep at a time. We crawled along. We still crashed. There was a ravine on one side of us, a sheer cliff face that fell hundreds of feet down the mountainside. I guess I should be glad we didn't crash in that direction. Instead, we crunched into the uphill side of the mountain and stuck there. As gusts of wind revealed and concealed the road ahead, we could suddenly see that there was no further to go. Only a few metres ahead of us, a 4x4 had crashed into the back of an ambulance, which presumably had Rue's leg patient inside it. The ambulance seemed to have crashed into whatever was in the front of it, and the slow-motion pile-up had blocked the narrow road completely. Drifts of snow were blowing in, filling the gaps between the vehicles. Our driver got on the radio and reported our situation, and that was that. We waited. Rescue. 2 hours passed. The bus had no heating, so we were glad of our workwear. Well, those of us that had workwear were glad of it. I'd long since surrendered my jacket to a girl who worked in the restaurant and had been sitting there in a shirt and trousers, but I still had 2 layers of fleece to protect me. Even so, sitting there, cooling our heels, so to speak, we began to get very cold indeed. Then there was a knock on the door, which shocked the hell out of me because I'd been half asleep for the last hour. 2 ski patrollers hauled themselves inside, having crawled all the way down here from base. The reason? Why, to bring us Mars bars, of course. They flung handfuls of chocolate bars down the length of the bus and told us not to worry, help was on the way, honest. And then they were gone, back into the howling gale to take chocolate to everyone else in the pile-up. It might sound silly, but these were emergency rations. Being trapped for hours in a freezing snowdrift was more than just uncomfortable, especially for people on their own in a car. Staying warm when you can't move anywhere is difficult at the best of times. The ski patrollers, fully equipped with their rescue gear, took everyone they could find in the cars in front of us to safety, by the simple expedient of tying them all together. We considered fighting our way back through the storm, but not everyone was equipped for it. Some of the indoor staff had thick waterproof jackets on, but no suitable footwear. It was all or nothing. Either we all stay or we all go. So we stayed. Another 2 hours passed. I was half asleep when the radio crackled with the news that the snowplow had opened up the way behind us. The driver gunned the engine, put the bus in reverse, and with the help of several spotters outside, negotiated the route backwards all the way to base. Gratefully, we flooded off the bus, through the double doors to our staff room, noting as we did so that the foyer was waist deep in snow. That was where I found Rue, battered and traumatised, but otherwise intact. When the wind peaked at just over 200 kilometres an hour, it had been too much for her. The boy she was linked to had been torn from his father's grip, and the pair of them, Rue plus boy, had been bowled over. Relentless gusts sent them sliding downhill faster and faster over the rain-slicked ice. Rue knew where that slide ended, the cliff edge, and a brutal plunge down the side of the mountain. But luckily there had been a car in the way. She'd slammed into it head first and managed to stick there, still clutching the young lad. The ski patrollers fought their way down to her one step at a time, reaching them and hauling them a few metres back to where the family car sat half buried in the snow. "How the hell can you stand up in this?" Rue had asked one patroller, shouting in his ear from an inch away. "We've got crampons on," he replied, looking puzzled. "You haven't?" Not long after this, the decision had been made to stop ferrying the customers to their cars. After all, it wasn't like they could go anywhere. Shortly after that, the decision had been made to go and find the customers now stranded in those cars and bring them all back to Tour 1. See what I mean? Chaos. By the time we arrived at Tour 1, it was rammed with customers. Possibly the worst news was this: the buggers had drunk all the coffee in the vending machine. For this reason, possibly amongst others, it was decided to try and transfer the customers to the restaurant. Until now, there hadn't been enough staff to make such an attempt, but a whole bus full of frozen lifties was exactly what they needed. The plan was for all the outdoor staff to link arms into a human chain, stretching from Tour 1 along the driveway, up a flight of steps, across the courtyard and into the restaurant. We would then pass the customers along the chain, or, to be more precise, they would have to climb us. It went well. We did it in small bursts, as staying outside for any length of time was incredibly dangerous, not to mention unpleasant. The raging winds tore at us with sudden gusts capable of throwing us around like rag dolls. Plus, we were all thoroughly soaked and freezing cold. The last thing any of us needed was an entire crew with hypothermia. Most of us had to work tomorrow. After being part of the first few chains, I started to gain confidence and was trying to be more helpful. Stationing myself on the steps, which were the worst place, concrete covered with ice offering absolutely no purchase, I clung to the railings with one hand and helped people over the trickiest part of the route. I only dared to let go of the railings once to pass a nervous customer up to the next person in line, and a ferocious blast took my feet from under me. I literally flew halfway down the stairs and had time to wonder if I'd be rolled all the way across the car park to the precipice at the far edge, when a gloved hand shot out and latched onto my arm, swinging me back into the railings with some force. I grabbed on as tight as I could with numb fingers, got my feet back under me and quietly shit myself. Yet again, a ski patroller had saved the day. These lads were made of real hero stuff, make no mistake. In spite of the cold, his grip on my arm was like iron. "Careful, mate," he shouted, sounding considerably more cheerful than I felt. "It's a bit windy out." And he turned to help the next customer in line. In the restaurant, there was space to spread out, and it was heated. Some of the customers had been trapped there since the mountain closed and were overjoyed to be reunited with friends and family they thought were missing. We spent the rest of the evening trying to keep the crowd in a positive mood as we listened on the walkie-talkies for news. The series of events we heard unfolding were actually quite amusing to those of us not directly involved in them. It was a classic cascade of cock-ups, which you really had to be there to fully appreciate. First up, the snowplow that had liberated our bus had pushed onwards down the mountain, finding a path around the damaged vehicles and making it as far as the first bend in the road. There it had met its match in snow and had become bogged. Not to be deterred, the bosses sent out our monstrous John Deere tractor. This was a titanic machine with rear wheels taller than me. Its mission, to pull the snowplow out of the snowdrift. What could possibly go wrong with this? The tractor had made it halfway to the stranded snowplow when it had run out of gas. Whilst trying to figure out what was wrong, the tractor driver had gone out to get a look, only to have the door torn off by the wind as soon as he opened it. "Fucking idiots!" was heard over the radio, presumably directed at whoever's job it was to keep the tractor full of fuel. And then there came a somewhat weak addendum. Can someone help me? The cab is filling up with snow." So it was the idiot's turn to save the day. They piled into a ute, and so, with tyres wrapped in snow chains and a few gallons of petrol in the back, they charged off to the rescue. At least until a flying chunk of ice shattered their rear windscreen, showering them with glass and snow in equal measure. They drove a bit more slowly after that. But the chain of bad luck had to break. The ute boys refilled the tractor, dug out the cab, and in turn it freed the snowplough. Then all the vehicles made a solemn funeral procession pace all the way down the mountain, which took them 3 hours. That was the worst of it though. We started filling the staff buses with customers using the same human chain method, and they set off one at a time to make their way downhill. The buses made better time of it now that the snowplough had done its job. It only took them 4 hours to make a return trip. And then, at long last, it was our turn. As our bus inched its way down the mountain, opinion was yet again divided into 3 camps. There were those who viewed the day as a complete disaster. They were pissed off at the managers, annoyed with the customers, and were constantly moaning about how terrible the ordeal had been. They were mostly the indoor staff. Then there were the people who thought, like me, this had been one hell of an adventure. It was the most exciting day by far that had happened to me on the ski field. One day, I thought, I might even get to write about this. My shift had started that morning at 7 a.m. I'd clocked off and been sent home at midday. At 2:45 the following morning, I staggered in through the door, still soaked to the skin, chilled and exhausted. Rue arrived even later than me, the 6 roadies having been the last group to leave the mountain, crammed into a battered ute with no back window. I admit, I nearly cried with relief when she clomped in, still covered in snow. 4 people died in that storm, which for New Zealand represents a significant portion of the population. Luckily for us, none of them were on our mountain. Somehow, we'd managed to get everyone down without a single serious injury. We even got a mention on the news for it. Oh, and the third opinion. Held by a small minority of veteran staff, it was best voiced by a huge, heavily tattooed Maori bloke who was working his 7th consecutive ski season. "Ah, that was nothing, eh?" he said to anyone who would listen. "You should have been here for the great storm." What time are we on, love?
You've got, 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
The final chapter.
Shall I do Jill?
What's Jill?
Jill's engagement or just our engagement?
Probably finish our engagement.
I'll finish with our engagement. So, this chapter's called Full Circle.
Is it blurry? Just check your things.
Me? Not as far as I can tell. It's, oh, we're having problems. Wow, it is really, that seems to be really blurry.
Let's see if that works.
That's so weird because I'm seeing it not blurry. Sorry guys, sorry about the blurriness.
I don't know, it just popped up like that.
Oh well, just, you know.
There you go,
Oh.
back to normal. There you go.
Do not fear.
You're in high
Do not adjust your set. Okay, carry on. Last one this one, I promise. Full circle. When Sonia picked us up from Perth Airport in her crumbling Morris Minor, the drive back to Roleystone already felt like coming home. It was bittersweet moving back into the games room in her dad's house. I reclaimed the sofa, but this time Jill wasn't sleeping opposite me. She'd stayed in New Zealand, moving in with her future husband Chris as they tried to plan for a future together. Rue returned to the room she'd slept in as a child, but Frida, of course, her mother, was gone as well. A lot had changed for all of us, and for this was very much my mind was on the last few days as they ticked down towards my 3rd Christmas in Australia. Because as far as change goes, I was about to push the envelope just a little bit, or at least I was going to try to. As midnight approached on Christmas Eve, I felt strangely detached from the merriment around me. It wasn't that I was unhappy, but I had a job to do, a task to accomplish, and it was one of the scariest situations I'd ever found myself in. I paced the corridor leading to the bedrooms, muttering to myself, paced and muttered. If anyone had noticed me, they'd have thought, well, let's face it, they'd seen me doing plenty of stranger things in my time. They'd have thought it was perfectly normal. But no one saw me, and time was exactly my problem, because it was running out. I had to do this. It was now, or some other time. It didn't have to be now, after all. There was no real reason for it. A silly, self-imposed deadline was all that I'd be breaking, and any rule that I'd come up with was bound to be flawed. Maybe I should give it up altogether, I thought, at least for now. No. This had to be done, and now, before I lost my nerve. Who was I kidding? I wasn't even close to having my nerve. But I had something else in abundance. I have stupidity. So I ignored my screaming instincts and did it anyway. I knocked on the door of Gerrit's study and went in. "Hi," I said, trying and failing to sound casual. "Can I talk to you about something?" "That sounds serious," he said. Then I closed the door behind me, and I think that got him really worried. So I cut right to it. I didn't think he'd appreciate small talk, and I wasn't up to it. I was sweating, visibly trembling. Even my voice was shaking. I was, quite plainly, terrified. I'd like to ask your permission to marry your daughter, I said. I blurted it all out at once for fear it would stay inside me forever if I didn't. Gerrit's face went from concern to shock to delight in less time than it took me to write it. Considerably less, actually, as I only typed with 2 fingers. Yes, of course, that's great news, mate. I wondered if this was going to happen soon. Oh, thank God for that. I was so nervous. Yes, I can tell. And that was that. I swore Gerrit to silence and hugged him for the first time ever. He'd have to get used to it. I figured he was going to be my father-in-law. But I should probably draw the line at calling him Daddy. And then I went back into the family room where last-minute adjustments were being made to the pile of presents under the tree. Less than an hour remained. I asked Rue if she'd like to come with me for a quiet stroll, and she said she would, which was good. Otherwise, I'd have struggled to get her alone in the house full of her sisters on Christmas Eve. We walked through a pleasant Rolling Stone evening, taking advantage of the comparative coolness. We talked as we usually did, but you know what? I can't remember a single word of it. I could only hope I wasn't babbling like an idiot, as all my focus was on what was about to happen. I'm not a great multitasker, it has to be said. If I talk while I walk, I invariably end up lost. If I try to eat at the same time, I end up in hospital. Rue was steering me, as usual, with light pressure on my hand, so this freed me up to spot potential sights. Unfortunately, I was drawing a blank. We'd walked a larger circuit than usual, passing down the hill and back up it from a different direction. We'd passed houses aplenty and scraggly bits of bush, but this was a fairly well-developed area. There just weren't any hidden spots of woodland or sudden breathtaking views on offer. It was only the road, and as we walked beside it, closer and closer to our house, I started to get desperate. Let's turn up there, I suggested, and pulled Rue off the pavement to follow the road a bit further uphill. Now I could see some trees around me, but only enough to shield the surrounding houses from the street. We reached the top of the hill. From there, the way led down, directly to the top of Rue's driveway. We'd taken the long way round, and it had rewarded me with nothing. I looked around frantically. This was it. Last chance. Still nothing presented itself. Except... Let's go and stand over there, I said, pointing across the road. On the storm drain? She asked. Oh, that's what it is. I'd noticed the raised platform on the opposite verge and frankly had no other options. Yes, it's perfect. To her credit, Rue never questioned me with this. And she knew, I guess we'd been together for quite a while now, and she knew I was a freak. At least I hope so, or she was about to get more than she'd bargained for. I led her over the deserted road, through the coarse, scrubby verge grass, and onto what turned out to be a large manhole cover set in a raised square of concrete. We stopped there, and I held her close. It's beautiful here, isn't it? She cast a wary eye down the hill we'd hiked up. The view was of road, fading into a darkness punctuated by streetlights. On the upside, it was lined with trees. On the downside, they were invisible in the shadows. We were directly under a streetlight, which kind of obliterated most of our surroundings anyway. I figured it was as good as I was likely to get. You know how much I love you, I started. I was looking right into her eyes and she was looking into mine. Yes, she said, me too. So I want to ask you something. I heard a sharp intake of breath as I lowered myself to one knee. I noted in passing that a colony of massive red ants were trooping straight across the manhole cover. Oh well, nothing I could do about that. Just be a man, I thought. I looked up. Rue was crying already, faint tear tracks staining her cheeks, tiny beads glistening on her eyelashes. You know how much I love you? She sniffed but a sob and nodded. Ow! I shouted at her. Sorry, it's the ants. They're everywhere and they bite. That's okay. I love you. Right. Well, I know we've been together a while now, and I was thinking, ow, you little bastard! Are you... I'm sorry. You can stand up if you want. Thanks, but I want to... Ah, motherfucker! I stood up. Sorry, that one really hurt. I scratched my knee where a substantial lump was already blossoming. Hang on. I lowered myself into an awkward half-crouch with one knee vaguely lower than the other. I took hold of her hands, more for support than for romantic emphasis. The only things still touching the ground were my feet, and the ants were swarming all over them. I can't stay like this for long, I explained, so you're going to have to answer this one quickly. There was no response from Rue. She was properly crying now, either with love or with despair. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I love you with all my heart. I love you as long as we live. I want to spend the rest of my life with you and be together forever. Will you marry me? Rue, drenched in tears, gave a kind of snotty burble. Was that a yes? I asked. She was shaking her head. To clear the tears, I hoped, as I had both of her hands. My attention was 96.4% on her, waiting for some kind of confirmation or reply. The other 3.6% of my attention was on the truly impressive bull ant climbing my leg, which had reached my knee and was now headed towards the gaping leg hole of my shorts. I'm afraid I'm going to have to rush you. Yes, she cried. I said yes. And with that, I was released, both emotionally and physically. I stood up, wrapped my arms around Rue, pulling her close and sobbing into her hair. I love you so much. I love you too, she sobbed back. Just think of all the adventures waiting for us. Think of all the things we can do together. I know. And then I felt a sudden pinch and sprang back away from her. I'm sorry, I said, but it's... I know. And there she stood, gazing at me with what I like to think of as devotion in her eyes, while I hopped from foot to foot, shrieking and cursing and punched myself repeatedly in the nuts. Now, Rue has asked me to make it known that she's never, ever in her life, in fact, made any noise even remotely resembling a snotty burble.
It's true, I've never done that.
But I've chosen to keep this offending statement in, however, as there are two sides to every story, and this is mine.
I did not. I would never make a noise like a snotty verbal. That's not me. I wouldn't. You can't say that in a book. It's just...
Shall I read the epilogue?
Yes.
2 pages. Epilogue. Rue was delighted. Rue's sisters were delighted. Rue's dad was delighted, which was quite a relief for me, I can tell you.
Yes.
Frida would have been delighted too, he told me, which brought a tear to my eye. There was quite a lot to talk about when I called my parents to wish them Merry Christmas. Predictably, they were delighted. Jill and Chris had decided to wait to break their engagement news, and Mum came to visit them in New Zealand. Being rather nervous themselves, they ended up waiting till Mum was actually leaving. Actually, until she was on the escalator on the way up to airport security, having checked her bags in and everything. Then Jill shouted the news up to her as though she'd only just remembered it, and Mum, all 5'1 3/4" of her, turned around and sprinted back down the up escalator as fast as her stumpy little legs would carry her. Alas, her somewhat gnomish stature didn't lend it very well to such acrobatics, and after a good few minutes of full tilt downhill stair climbing, she was just about keeping pace with the upward speed of the escalator. So she gave up, let it carry her to the top, before taking the matching escalator back down. There she embraced the happy couple and whispered a few choice words in Chris's ear, which none of us were found to find out about until many months later. If you hurt my daughter, she'd said quite cheerfully, I will kill you. And then it really was time for her to go, and Jill and Chris were free to announce their engagement to the rest of the world. Rue and I made our engagement public soon afterwards. All of which left us with a couple of interesting dilemmas to sort out. Because Jill and Chris were now living in his mum's house in New Zealand, and Rue and I planned to permanently set up shop in Perth, in Australia. Most of the families concerned lived thousands of miles away in England, apart from the non-Australian contingent of Rue's relatives, who were Dutch. We had 2 weddings to arrange, on one side of the world or the other, or both, and not quite enough money between all of us to pay for the cake. Oh, and for those of us who were still English, there would be the small matter of emigrating. Don't worry, love, it will all work out, Rue said, and deep down in my heart, I knew she was right. Somehow, things always did work out for us. After all, it was only a marriage. How hard can it be? One thing was for sure. Whatever we managed to organise, it was bound to be an epic affair. Chaotic, potentially disastrous, and, at least from my perspective, utterly terrifying. I'm not a big fan of responsibility, you see. In fact, I regularly wake up in a cold sweat having had a nightmare about owning a house and a car, struggling to make mortgage repayments and holding down a job where they didn't try and pay me in beer vouchers. And what did this mean for my life of adventures? Was it over? Was I on the verge of being domesticated? Ha! Not a chance. I'd finally found the woman of my dreams, and she was very nearly as crazy as I was. So far, she'd seen me at my best, which, I'll grant you, isn't fantastic, and she'd seen me close to my worst, and she'd seen me washed off the side of Australia's national monument, so I like to think she had some inkling of what was in store for her. Hey, does this mean we get a honeymoon? Rue asked. We could go anywhere in the world. How exciting. Yes, quite, I said. One more thing to add to the list. And maybe you could publish that book you've been writing about since before we met, she added. Ouch. And then, of course, there was the biggest question of all to answer, because getting married was just a happy speed bump on the road trip of our lives. For now, for once, we could see at least that far ahead. But what was next? What was around the next corner? And you know what? We've just about run out of room here, so I guess I'll keep that surprise for the next instalment. The end.
The end. Yay!
And there we go, that's that one, guys.
Yeah, it's a good one.
That was a good one. I was tearing up a little bit there. It's,
Yay! So good. You're so lucky. Oh, yay. I'm so glad I said
by the way,
yes.
everybody, Rue is sporting
The
a
best hoodie.
4XL hoodie
It's massive.
because she likes we discovered yesterday that she likes 2 kinds of things. She likes extremely big, ridiculously large things, like those oversized chairs they sometimes have on displays where you can sit there and feel little, and a 4XL hoodie, which she can actually get her knees up inside and pretty much swamp her entire body in.
True.
And really tiny things.
So I like miniature things, tiny little things, and ginormous, oversized things. And then I like Tony as well. I'm not saying...
nothing in between. Nothing
Apart
in
from
between.
you. Oh.
I'm huge. Anyway.
We'll see you all in a fortnight.
Thanks, guys. Yeah,
Thank you so
we've got
much.
our anniversary coming up, as I said. So we're not going to be here next weekend. So we'll see you the weekend after that for Can I Kiss Her Yet?
Oh, you can't kiss
I can.
me. We're married now.
Yeah, that's going to be really good, really exciting. So have a great week, great weekend after that, another week,
Yay.
and then we will hopefully see some of you after that. So
stay safe and healthy.
look after yourself,
everyone.
guys, and be safe.